begin with breaking news. A stunning and historic vote in Britain. The decision to leave the European Union will have a profound impact on the economic, political, and social fabric of the world. Celebrations erupted overnight as the referendum results came in. It is a massive defeat for British Prime Minister David Cameron, who led the drive to remain in the EU. He announced this morning he will step down later this year.
Stock markets in Asia and Europe tumbled after the vote. Britain dropped nearly 5%, Germany almost 7%, and Japan about 8%. Wall Street expects a big loss when it opens this morning, too. We have a team of correspondents on both sides of the Atlantic covering this unfolding story. We begin with Mark Phillips. He's outside the Houses of Parliament in London. Mark, good morning.
Good morning. Well, it would be hard to overestimate both the shock and the consequences of this vote. The pound, as you say, has fallen like a rock, its largest ever single-day fall. The stock market has fallen off a cliff. And David Cameron, who led the campaign to stay in and who lost and who staked his whole career on this outcome, is gone.
But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction.
One by one, as the voting districts reported overnight, the shock started to come. People inside Manchester Town Hall cheered as their votes tallied up to leave. The scenes would be repeated across the country. The opinion polls had suggested a close race and even a narrow victory to stay in the EU. They were wrong. The City of London, the financial markets had bet on an in result as well. They were wrong. Only voters in London and Scotland favored staying. Elsewhere, people wanted out. And David Cameron, thoroughly defeated, felt he had only one option: to go.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
Those who had argued to leave said the predictions of gloom was scaremongering. We'll see. The most recognizable face of the Leave campaign, Boris Johnson, was jeered as he left his house this morning. Others could barely contain their glee.
The June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day. Thank you.
Both sides used fear in this campaign, fear of economic decline by those who argued to stay in, fear of being overwhelmed by immigration from the EU by those wanting out. And they won. In the face of all this turmoil, the Bank of England has stepped in to say effectively, take a deep breath, the economy can handle it. We'll see.
The UK will remain a strong and committed NATO ally, and it will continue to play its leading role in our alliance. Today, as we face more instability and more uncertainty, NATO is more important than ever as a platform for cooperation among European allies and between Europe and North America.
The journalists were reportedly attacked and beaten up. Media reports and press advocacy groups say the journalists, including foreign correspondents, were also robbed as they covered demonstrations against food shortages earlier this month in the Venezuelan capital.
They robbed all our cameras, microphones, our equipment for the protection too, and we couldn't do anything about it.
Journalist Amanda Sanchez was covering the protest. She says they were not only attacked by a gang of government loyalists, but also by Venezuelan security forces standing nearby.
We had to hide inside of a building because they were with the arms. They were shooting in the air. They were using the pepper spray against us, and the tear gases too.
Attacks against journalists in Venezuela have been happening for years. This video shows a member of the National Guard hitting a reporter's camera. It happened during an anti-government protest in 2014. After hitting the camera, the guardsman then goes after the reporter.
Tuve que pasar 6 meses fuera.
In 2012, Venezuelan columnist Nelson Bocaranda says he had to go into exile briefly to avoid prison after reporting that then President Hugo Chavez had cancer.
Después que muere Chávez, voy a
His crime? He says he refused to reveal his sources to the government.
Our own CNN team was threatened with expulsion here in Caracas recently for trying to ask a direct question to the foreign minister. Another CNN team was attacked and robbed in 2014, berated on national TV, and later asked to leave the country. In April, CNN en Español's Osmari Hernandez was among several journalists who were forcibly removed from the headquarters of Venezuela's National Electoral Council by the National Guard. Some say journalists are not collateral damage, but the targets.
It doesn't happen by chance. It's a premeditated act. You are a target. They treat you as if you're the opposition, not a media outlet.
President Nicolás Maduro says foreign powers and the Venezuelan right are bent on destabilizing his government, and the media is one of the tools they're using to accomplish this goal.
Venezuela quiere ser llevada.
They want to take Venezuela into a situation of generalized violence, something they haven't been able to accomplish.
Reporters say it's not the media, but the president's failed socialist policies that are wreaking havoc in Venezuela, and journalists are just convenient scapegoats who end up paying the price in this polarized country.
Record crowd is expected at the NYC Pride March this Sunday in New York City. The annual celebration of gay rights began back in 1970, but this year will bring solidarity and a tribute for the 49 people killed in a gay nightclub in Orlando. Josh Elliott of our streaming network at CBSN is outside New York City's historic Stonewall Inn, the birthplace of the American gay rights movement. Josh, good morning.
Good morning. The Stonewall Inn just behind me and much of the surrounding area are under increased police protection this morning as organizers of the NYC Pride March and Rally continue preparations for an event that they believe will be another historic chapter for the LGBT community. Flowers and photographs of the Orlando shooting victims make up this memorial at the Stonewall Inn, while positioned just a few yards away, heavily armed officers of the NYPD.
This is an opportunity to show solidarity and to show that the relationship between the police and the gay community is improving at a time when the complexities of the issues facing the gay community are multiplying.
William Bratton is New York City's police commissioner.
Beyond the show of force, how much intelligence gathering has gone into the preparations for this?
We have a very robust intelligence operation, and ears will be particularly attuned to anything that might relate to this parade.
A record 1.6 million people attended NYC Pride last year, which was a celebration of the Supreme Court's ruling on marriage equality. Organizers say the shooting at Orlando's Pulse nightclub might change the tone of this year's march, but not its message.
Our movement started in a nightclub where we didn't feel safe. And here we are almost 50 years later, and we still don't feel safe in these places.
In the summer of 1969, a police raid on the Stonewall Inn, a known neighborhood gay bar, led to riots, rebellion, and launched the modern gay rights movement.
There's no denying that we have history that we have to overcome, but you learn from the past. You don't allow yourself to be defined by the past. You want to be defined by the present and be defined by what you're going to do going forward.
What's the importance of what we're going to see here over the next few days?
I think the importance is to send a very powerful message that this community will not be silenced. You can take 49 of our brothers and sisters, you can commit hate crimes against us, but you will not silence this community, and that is the most important thing about Pride.
NYC Pride kicks off tonight with a rally nearby. Each attendee there will be given an orange bandana in honor of the victims of the Orlando massacre. And one of the owners of the Pulse nightclub is in fact expected to be in attendance and speak at tonight's event. And perhaps owing to the times in which we live, there will be a large contingent of NYPD there as well. And Jeff, it does bear mentioning, there has been no credible threat made against any of the activities planned for this weekend.
The other major issue in this presidential campaign worries over terror. And just a week and a half now since Orlando There was a headline today, a gunman walking into a movie theater in Germany, suddenly taking hostages, SWAT teams moving in, the standoff lasting hours. ABC's Alex Marquardt tonight on how authorities saved everyone in that theater.
These were the tense images outside a popular movie theater this afternoon in the small German town of Verheim. Police getting an emergency call that a masked man carrying a long gun had burst into the theater where there were 30 people and barricaded himself with several hostages.
He took hostages and a lot of children were inside.
Much of the world now on edge. 11 days after the nightclub attack in Orlando, Europe still on high alert after the Paris and Brussels attacks. The first question, could this be another terror attack? The police taking no chances. SWAT teams surrounded and stormed the theater, reportedly firing tear gas.
The man deliberately aimed with his weapon at the police forces and they shot him down.
3 hours after it started, the gunman was killed. None of the moviegoers were harmed. Tonight, an investigation is underway. The police have said there are no indications of Islamic extremism. Witnesses reported that the young man appeared confused. His motive tonight is still unclear.
Hundreds of suspected sexual predators have been arrested across the U.S. for targeting kids, in many cases online. The U.S. Justice Department sponsored 61 programs across the country as part of Operation Broken Heart 3, which ran from April to May. The operation was created to track predators who sexually exploit children, possess and distribute child pornography, or engage in child prostitution. Special Agent for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, John Reynolds, said at a press conference about the sting, the incidence of child sexual exploitation has reached staggering proportions. Authorities said Monday that 238 people were arrested in Southern California under this year's operation, including religious and community leaders. Operation Broken Heart began in 2014. As part of the operation, authorities use undercover methods, like posing as a child to find sexual predators online.
So parents, you cannot stick your head in the sand on this. You've got to be aware of what your kids are doing online.
According to the DOJ, about 13% of young internet users receive unwanted sexual attention online. The DOJ suggests monitoring kids' internet use and talking to them about online safety.
We have found evidence, and quite extensive evidence, that other types of incendiary weapons have been used, weapons containing, for example, as you mentioned, thermite.
Beneath California is moving.
We're talking movements that are maybe the width of 2 stacked pennies every year.
Researchers have now found evidence that tectonic plates are grinding over and under one another. In the past, computer models simulating the San Andreas Fault have only estimated this movement. But with GPS technology, researchers have physically identified these tiny shifts. No need to panic, says Sam Howell from the University of Hawaii.
So it's not like all of a sudden your house is going to sink down. You know, these are really small motions, like you said, maybe a foot over 150 years. But understanding those motions allows us to go back and check our knowledge of what we think is going on.
Monitoring the San Andreas Fault is critical because it does have the potential to unleash a catastrophic quake on the West Coast. Past studies have shown there is enough stress on the fault to produce an earthquake of a magnitude greater than 7.0. Howell compared the strain to standing on a square piece of carpet.
If you're standing on a square scrap of carpet, you're kind of like the part of the fault that's not moving. And you have some friends that start pushing on the sides of the carpet. Even though they're only pushing horizontal, because you're standing there, the carpet's going to warp and it's going to come up in some places.
And he says small vertical movement isn't the biggest concern.
It's not a bad thing. You know, the real seismic hazard comes from the horizontal motions, which are 10 times that.
In fact, the last big quake on the San Andreas Fault was a magnitude 7.9. And that ruptured from Monterey to Los Angeles counties in 1857. Scientists say this new data doesn't help them predict exactly when or where the next quake might occur.
Powerful storms this morning threatened West Virginia with new flooding. Devastating floodwaters overnight swamped vehicles. At least 4 people are dead, including an 8-year-old boy. Another child is missing. Parts of the mid-Atlantic region today face more severe weather. Chris Van Cleve is in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. Chris, good morning.
Well, good morning. 44 of West Virginia's 55 counties under a state of emergency. The Howard Creek here appears to be rising again. All of this here was underwater yesterday, left behind all kinds of debris. We think that came off of a building. In the air, there's the smell of diesel fuel and propane because a propane store washed away. These tanks are everywhere. And if your car had the misfortune of getting in the way of the water, this is what it looked like today. Cell phone video captured floodwaters washing away this still burning home in White Sulphur Springs.
Dad, watch out!
This morning, parts of the West Virginia community were still on fire.
Whoa, watch it. I'm all right.
We were with Kevin Sarver as he returned to his damaged and mud-covered home, hoping his pictures of his 3 daughters survived.
Huh?
Are they intact?
Yeah. I know some of those might be bad, but most of them are good. That's all I care about. That's all I care about.
A day of torrential rains sent cars careening down waterlogged streets.
Yeah, it is.
And knocked out power to some 40,000 people. Parts of Virginia and West Virginia faced devastating flooding Thursday.
Just high water everywhere. People can't get out. They can't get in.
In Covington, Virginia, the Jackson River reached a record high, forcing evacuations.
I'm still shaken. I really just want to break down and cry right now.
Paul Moya found himself trapped on the top of his roof as the floodwaters rose. A diabetic in need of medical attention, he watched as his daughter's home was washed away and shot this video as he waited for rescue. We spoke to him from his hospital bed.
All I can see were the homes burning and then the electrical poles burning. I think I could say that now. I was scared. I could say that now. I was scared.
As you can see, more rain is in the forecast for today, as well as some thunderstorms. Jeff?
More than 1,000 search and rescue crews in eastern China are finding an increasingly grim picture on Friday in the aftermath of a deadly tornado. The extreme weather, which also included hailstorms, thunderstorms, and lightning, killed scores and injured hundreds in parts of Yancheng City in Jiangsu province on Thursday afternoon. Now, the casualty figures may rise even further as emergency crews continue to sift through large areas of rubble and their effort being hampered by continued rain. Some survivors have told CNN the scene right now resembles that of the aftermath of a major earthquake, with homes flattened and roads destroyed. And many are still very much shaken by what they saw a day earlier. Some have described it as 20 minutes of apocalypse, when the sky suddenly turned dark and roofs ripped open and cars tossed into the air or into the river. Now, there were pictures posted online on Thursday night showing school children in bloodstained clothes waiting to be treated, or senior citizens being carried into the ER on stretchers, as well as dead bodies still lying in the rubble. Now, there was a sigh of relief on Friday morning when state media reported that the authorities have contained large amounts of dangerous chemicals stored in a collapsed factory building. The central authorities here in Beijing have sent a team to the region to oversee disaster relief operations, also sending in thousands of tents and folding beds, as well as emergency lights. Now, tornadoes are not common in China, but they're not unheard of either. But still, most people are not taught what to do when a tornado hits. So there seems to be a lack of a reliable warning system or emergency bunkers where people can seek refuge in. And also remember, Yancheng is a fairly densely populated place with more than 7 million residents. So all these factors may explain the deadly consequences of this extreme weather system.
I'm leaving. Yeah. Oh. There ain't no ball game worth.